Whether we stay in a range between 80 and 100 or 80 and 95, that's possible. The big dogs can hold the price down. Gold was basically dead money for almost 5 years. JP Morgan had to pay $1 billion fine for spoofing the price of gold.
Do you think it will have a blow-off top in the AI?
Bubbles usually inflate longer than you think they can.
Do you think that Bitcoin will get caught up in this and dragged lower?
Great question. Great question. So the short
모건 크릭 캐피털 매니지먼트의 CEO이자 세계적인 경제 전문가 마크 유스코가 2026년에 펼쳐질 비트코인의 향방에 대해 심도 있는 분석을 제시했습니다. 과연 2026년 암호화폐 시장에는 어떤 시나리오가 펼쳐지게 될까요? 그의 분석을 함께 살펴보시죠.
So hopefully we can kick off with a bit of a bullish bang depending on where you positioned. Because you recently, I think, said a few months ago that Bitcoin was in a bear market. And I think many people had been saying that as well. Yeah. Potentially even a crypto winter, but different like any other. Given that now we're 6 days into January and it seems as if the markets are perking up, Bitcoin's at about 94K. Are you still of the view that we are in a technical bear market, or do you think this is just a dead cat bounce? And how are you reading the market right now?
No, it's the question, and it's interesting. So, I was on record a year ago in January, which was not very popular, saying that the 4-year cycle was alive and well, and actually that it wasn't a 4-year cycle. It's actually, I call it 3.11. It's 3 years and 11 months. And that's because it's based on the number of blocks, not on a calendar. And so, December of 2017, November 2021, October 2025, that cycle has played out exactly as we would expect. And it didn't get quite as high in terms of, I thought we'd peak at around 150-ish based on, and the logic was that in the previous cycles, 17 and 21, we got to 2 times fair value. So fair value is determined by the Metcalfe's law model that Tim Peterson and others run. And so in 2017, fair value was 10. We got to 20 before we crashed all the way back down to 3. Then in 21, fair value was 32, 33. We got all the way to 69. Now, why do we get so much above fair value? Humans are going to human. We get greed. We get, leverage. And when leverage is abundant, you can get very much above fair value. And that's why you then need a big crash. Because when you start the crash, in theory, if you're 2 times above, you only need a 50% correction to get back to fair value. But markets aren't that precise. They crash right through fair value and then go to the depths of despair. So long story short, in this 311 cycle, we get about a 360-day period that is crypto winter. And crypto winter lasts from the peak to, the next year. And in the 17 and 21 cycles, we had about an 84% drop and then a 74% drop. I argued that this time we were only going to get to about 50 to maybe 60% above fair value because there was less leverage. They'd taken some of the leverage out of the system. We didn't even get that far. We only got to 125. So we only got to about maybe 35, 40% above fair value being around 91. So long story short, the correction needed to be less. And so from 125 all the way down, I think we hit 80 at some point. That's a pretty meaningful correction. That's below fair value. So could we be stuck in this meandering range for the duration of the crypto winter, which would come sometime, September-ish, August, September-ish of this year? Yeah. So whether we stay in a range between 80 and 100 or 80 and 95 or 75 and 105, I don't really know, but I think that's possible. And so while it's certainly bullish when prices recover and rise, I don't see the momentum that you need to push back into a bull market until we clear out some of the tourists, I guess, the tourists who come in and lever up.
Do you think that Bitcoin will get caught up in this and dragged lower?
Great question. So the short answer is short term, yes. Long term, no. Depending on how much leverage is in the system, meaning the overall system, not just the Bitcoin system, but the overall system, will determine how much Bitcoin, gold, bonds, et cetera, give back during that deleveraging. The negative side of that is today, margin debt is the highest it's ever been. Now, margin debt as a percentage of market cap is not the highest it's ever been. So it's still a high number, but it's not as a percentage super high. So that's one negative, not super negative, but one negative. So, and why does that matter? Go back to 2000. They run this drill and say everybody locked down and the markets collapse. And Bitcoin fell 50% in 12 hours, right? 50% in 12 hours. Everybody says, see, it's totally correlated. I'm like, no, it's not correlated at all. And within a very short time, Bitcoin was back, and it took stocks a while for them to, print the money and start the rally. But Bitcoin bounced back really quickly. Why? Well, when you get a margin call, right? If you own a bunch of stocks and you have borrowed against them and you get a margin call and the stocks are down, well, you can't sell the stocks. So you got to sell what's not down. Well, what's not down? Cash, gold, bonds, Bitcoin. So all of those things fell in those first couple weeks of March in 2020, just like stocks. And everybody said, see, correlations are one. Like, well, duh, in a crisis, all correlations go to one. But then something interesting happened is they diverge. And bonds went back up and Bitcoin went back up. And if you bought that $5,000 bottom, that was a pretty good buy in March of 2020. Same thing with oil stocks. Everybody thought, oil price went negative in April for a couple, hours. Crazy. You had to pay people to take your oil. So long story is ultimately, I think the same thing will happen if we get an unexpected decline and a deleveraging. People will be forced to sell Bitcoin, gold, whatever, and pay their margin calls.
이번 인터뷰에서 마크 유스코는 현재 비트코인 시장을 단기 가격 움직임이 아니라 사이클 구조 관점에서 바라봐야 한다고 설명합니다. 그는 비트코인이 흔히 말하는 4년 사이클이 아닌 블록스를 기준으로 한 3년 11개월 사이클을 따른다고 강조합니다. 이 구조에서는 고점 이후 약 1년가량 크립토 윈터 구간이 이어지며 과거 사이클에서도 이 시기에 큰 조정이 나타났습니다. 다만 마크 유스코에 따르면 이번 사이클은 다소 차이가 있습니다. 시스템 전반에서 레버리지가 줄어들면서 가격이 공정가치 대비 과도하게 상승하지 않았고 그만큼 조정폭도 제한적이었다는 점입니다. 실제로 비트코인은 공정가치 대비 약 35에서 40% 상승에 그친 뒤 8만 달러 수준까지 조정을 받았습니다. 그는 이를 이미 의미 있는 조정으로 평가합니다. 그리고 현재 시장에 대해 그는 단기 반등은 가능하지만 아직 본격적인 강세장으로 전환될 만큼의 모멘텀은 부족하다고 봅니다. 특히 레버리지를 활용한 단기 자금이 정리되기 전까지는 가격이 일정 범위 내에서 횡보할 가능성이 높다고 설명했습니다. 이제 이어지는 내용에서는 이러한 단기적 불확실성에도 불구하고 마크 유스코가 비트코인의 미래를 왜 여전히 긍정적으로 바라보는지 설명하는데요. 이어서 살펴보시죠. 그리고 혹시 거래 수수료 절반을 다시 환급받는 방법 아직 모르시나요? 단 5분만 투자하면 평생 수수료 돌려받는 셀퍼럴, 선택이 아닌 필수입니다. 자세한 내용은 영상 더보기란을 확인해보세요.
The difference is I don't believe Bitcoin is a risk asset. I don't believe that people that own it to speculate like they do NVIDIA or Microsoft or other tech stocks. I own Bitcoin as a savings technology. It's the greatest savings technology I think the world has ever seen because in normal savings, right, you put your money in the bank and you put it in a low risk asset to save it. And every day the government steals part of it back from you through this thing called inflation. That's a crappy system. It's theft. Then what do? Well, I would invest it. Okay, well, if I want to invest, I have to take some risk. I have to take equity risk or credit risk or innovation risk, and I can get a higher return. But the nice thing about Bitcoin as a savings technology is I can take it off grid, out of the system, and save it. And every day that government creates inflation to steal my wealth from my fiat, I get an increase. Now, it's a similar thing with real estate. I use the example of my house, right? According to Zillow, my house is worth twice as much as it was 5 years ago. My house didn't grow. It didn't get more efficient. In fact, it actually wore out a little bit. I had to put money back into it. So it really didn't appreciate. What happened is the money got worse. We've printed 80% of all the money in the United States. We've been a republic for 249 and a half years. 80% of all the money in that 249 and a half years came in the last 5 years. Crazy. So we've devalued the currency by a lot. That's why gold's up. It's why silver's up. It's why Bitcoin's up. It's why houses are up. Because as we devalue the base currency, the asset that you own that has to be denominated in something, like use gold. 1 ounce of gold has been 1 ounce of gold for 5,000 years. Hasn't changed, right? But the value of that 1 ounce of gold has changed. It's interesting. It's been exactly the same for 5,000 years, meaning 5,000 years ago, you could give someone an ounce and you got a fine person suit. Today, you could give someone an ounce and you get a fine person suit. It's really quite interesting. Now, Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin's 1 Bitcoin, but we don't price Bitcoin in Bitcoin. We price it in dollars or yen or euros. Let's take today. So today people cry, oh, you should have bought Venezuelan stocks on last Friday before the thing happened. Oh, okay. So you bought Venezuelan stocks, but yes, Venezuelan stocks are up 75% in like 3 days, but the currency's down like 99.9%. You actually lost money. And in fact, in my office in the other part of the house, I have a 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar bill. Like literally 100 trillion, lots of zeros. It wouldn't buy a loaf of bread. So I'm a trillionaire in Zimbabwe, but I couldn't buy a loaf of bread because the value of the currency goes down so much. In fact, there's no time in history where you want to have your market be the best performing market parabolically, because that means your currency is getting cremated. It happened in Argentina. It happened in Zimbabwe. It happened in Venezuela. It happened, in Turkey. You don't want to be a Turkish billionaire because your currency is down 98%. So the same thing is true here. Is I believe Bitcoin is a different use case. It's a better form of money. Money is an asset that exists in the absence of a liability. Bitcoin is a better form of gold. It's equally scarce and it's more portable and more divisible. Simple example. If I had a bar of gold, which, maybe I have one lying around somewhere, but if I had it right here, I'm not strong enough to break it in half. I'm just not. Even if I could break it in half and try to send you half, I couldn't stuff it in my computer, right? But I can pick up my phone with a couple buttons. I can send you Bitcoin instantaneously. It's just a better form of money. And money is different than currency. Currency is backed by fiat, backed by debt, and governments like it. And it's a perfectly good thing. And we live based on it. But it's fallible in that it can be taken away from you. And it is taken away from you every single day, whether you live in Australia or, US or Europe. It doesn't matter. The governments are taking it away by printing more of this to fund their spending habits. So I will argue Bitcoin in the short run might go down, but over the long run, the response to that type of market correction will be more money printing, which means more value accreting to Bitcoin.
Yeah, he touched on many things there. So I think the main takeaway point is, of course, that Bitcoin has no top because fiat has no bottom.
Exactly.
오늘 영상 도움이 되셨다면 구독, 좋아요 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.